The Me and My Health Up podcast. How are you, Chris Reade?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. I really look forward to hearing lots about your story and how you overcome diabetes. So let's get into how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
Sure. It's so in 2017, I was healthy. I played a lot of sports, and I felt great. And uh, I discovered the problem that I had quite by accident, really, with a health screening that my life insurance agent screwed up, and I had to take the health test twice in a year. And I went from an A1C. A1C is the kind of average measurement of glucose in your blood over a month. And so 5.7 or lower is non diabetic, and 7 is where you start with diabetic. I was at about 5.6 the first year. And then less than 12 months later, when I accidentally had to take the same test again, I was at 9.1, which is a very serious. You go another point or two beyond that, and you're going to the hospital. And I felt fine. I felt totally normal, and I couldn't believe it. I struggled really hard to understand that it actually happened that fast. Most people get a lot of, hey, Chris, your sugar's getting a little high. Maybe we're getting into pre-diabetes. We should just take it a little easy. For me, that didn't happen. It just went from you're totally fine to we're going to want you to start shooting up insulin really soon, in a very, very short space of time. And that really galvanized me because I had a 7-year-old at the time, and I wasn't willing to accept what my primary care physician was telling me, which was this was progressive and incurable, and I would be dealing with it for the rest of my life and taking drugs the rest of my life, and that was it. And I couldn't accept that. And so I went to a lot of trouble and did a lot of research and found a different way to do that, which is really well, to be honest. And for your listeners in Australia, this will not be as surprising as it is in the US. In the US, that's kind of the norm that we think of in the medical world. But in the rest of the world, we've done a lot of research on this since the 70s that says that's just not the case. And so I followed a different way of doing things, which we can talk about. And within 6 months, got my A1C back down below 6 and then down to 5.4 by the time I was 6 months later. Um, and then I just kind of went along my life. About a year and a half ago, a friend of mine had a very similar experience. And he calls me up because he knew that I'd gone through this. And he said, hey, uh, my A1C's 13 and they want to throw me into the emergency room right now. And I said, well, man, we got to do something. And he said, well, what did you do? And I explained it to him. And I realized this is too much. I need to write it in an email. So I started writing in an email. And then I realized that it wasn't organized enough in an email. So then I started writing what became this book.
Wow.
So that's kind of it. That's like I said, I never thought to write this book. It was really a personal journey for me. And if my buddy Tim had not actually gotten a type 2 diagnosis like he did, just reminded me so much of my own, I don't know that I ever would have written it down and shared what I had learned along
Yeah,
that process.
very, yeah, just so nice that, your journey is now being shared with others that are helping them along their journey. So it's that ripple effect, they will sort of, yeah.
It is, and the other thing is in and I don't know about Australia, but in the US, if you ever get diabetes sewn into your medical chart, I call it the scarlet letter D. It's really, really hard to ever get that to be admitted that that isn't part of your world in the US.
Yeah, wow.
And
Wow.
so that was one of the reasons I never wanted to write about it. And Tim's experience convinced me that it was more important for other people to know there was a route that didn't involve taking a lot of drugs than it was to keep that stuff to myself and worry about my own deal. I felt it was important to share it, and that's why I took the trouble to write it down as a book.
And how's Tim now?
He's great. So in the end of my book, I talk about this. Uh, Tim lost about 80 pounds, got his A1C down to 4.9 with no
Wow,
drugs,
wow,
which is
wow,
amazing. Did that in
wow.
about 7, 8 months, doing it the same way I did it. And it's now, so that was a year and a half ago almost. So he's stayed on it at least a year and a half, which is a heck of a lot longer than anybody does a diet, which is why, and incidentally, one of the big things I talk about in this book, this is not a diet. I don't do diets. I don't believe in diets. Not against them. I guess they work for some folks, but I was only 44, 45 when that happened, and I realized I couldn't diet for the next 40 years. And so I needed something I could live with that was just kind of the background noise, and that's the way it has become over these last 7 or 8 years. And that, I think, is what enables Tim and anybody else who follows the way I've written it down to do that for long periods of time, is that it isn't anything special, frankly. It's just being consistent about it. It's little things every day, not nothing particularly big. It doesn't take a huge change in your life. It just takes a very different approach to food.
And I'm really looking forward to getting into this. But before we do, I'm really keen to better understand that, the two tests in a year. First one, I think you said around 5.4, so you're just under the threshold,
Yeah.
and then the second one came in at around 9. What had changed in that period of time in your life?
So I'll tell you, nothing, honestly. And that's one of the things that scared me into such dramatic action, honestly. Because if you Google that up, what you're going to see is that's referred to as rapid onset diabetes. Rapid onset diabetes has a small but not insignificant chance of being pancreatic cancer. And so I was very, very nervous. I'd had a close relative, my aunt, had died of pancreatic cancer at the same age. And so it had really thrown me for a loop. And I insisted on having a MRI at the time. And my doctors were like, you know what the percentage chance of you having pancreatic cancer at your age? And I said, just under 1%. So we'll take the test. Thanks very much. And we did, and I was fine. But I have no idea. I don't know what changed so radically. I really have no idea what that tipping point is. But it is one of those things, and I write about this in the book. Only in the last 5 years has the human race discovered what type 2 diabetes even is. Some, like, etiology, meaning it is fat, visceral fat on your pancreas. That's what it means. And that's why, and we all know that we all gain fat wherever we gain fat. And there is not really a full understanding about what the rules are that makes me gain fat in my belly or you in your butt or whatever, right? And so those same rules apply to visceral fat. Some people, and this is why everybody has met somebody who's a full on type 2 diabetic who is a runner and is like 6% body fat. And then they know people who are 300 pounds and are not diabetic. And it's because your body just, until it decides to store some of that fat in your pancreas, you're fine. But then as it starts doing that, it just gets progressively worse. And the worse it gets, the more likely that is to continue and your islet cells start malfunctioning. But the long and the short of it is, I haven't the faintest clue other than my body decided to throw a little fat on my pancreas. And that threw me over the hump very rapidly. And I didn't end up having pancreatic cancer, thank God. Um, or I wouldn't be talking to you. So yeah, so I don't really know, honestly. I will say my relationship to food at the time was not great because I used to think, I thought, I can eat McDonald's. I play volleyball, so I'm a volleyball player. I play 3, 4 days a week, sometimes 2, 3 hours at a shot. I was like, how can I possibly be a diabetic? Because I didn't understand what it was, right? And so I didn't. I was like, I'm fine. How could I be? How could anything be wrong? I could sit here and play with people 20 years younger than me and keep up with them. How could I possibly have this life-altering illness and feel nothing about it? And yet I did. And so that's where I took such a hard left turn in my life. And really, I kind of credit that left turn to my daughter being so young. It being so, it was like, man, if I don't change this pretty fast, I'm not going to see her 30. And so that was a big motivator for me.
Wow, what a story. Really, just to get an understanding of what your typical day of you mentioned volleyball, you mentioned McDonald's, but
Sure.
what was Chris Reed's life like at that point in time? Just to set
So my
the
yeah, sure.
baseline. Yeah, yeah,
So I'd
yeah.
get up in the morning, and I would very frequently make. So I grew up in New York. I live in New Orleans now, but I grew up in New York, and so I have the classic. Used to have. I don't anymore. I used to have the classic New York breakfast: the bagel, egg, and cheese sandwich. Which, if anybody's been to New York, you know is on every street corner in the city. And but from a sugar standpoint, that bagel is nothing but sugar. All that white flour is just sugar, 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 man. So I do that. Then for lunch, I was, not an unhealthy lunch eater, but I'd get a sandwich or something like that. Maybe I'd have a slice of pizza or something like that. And then dinner, and dinner could be, anything from sushi out to, you know, uh, uh, steaks or burgers at the house or something like that. Not pretty atypical. I never ate a ton of vegetables, but I also wasn't like a total carnivore. Pretty middle of the road. Um, I did love me some sugar, man. I will say. I mean, I it would not be crazy uncommon to go and have 5 or 6 Oreos before bed, that sort of thing. Or a little bit of ice cream, not a lot, but just a little bit of ice cream and a little Nutella on top. I was talking about that earlier today. And, I used to love that stuff, and it's funny, I mean, when I would get coffee in the morning, coffee, 5 or 6 sugars, don't really love the taste of coffee, have a whole bunch of sugar with it, and, but frankly, as an American, that's not really that far off of
Mm,
anybody's normal,
mm, mm,
you know? Um, and so I didn't feel like I was a terrible I wasn't, like, throwing down 6 Pepsis a day or something like that, you know? So I wasn't that crazy off center. It just, my pancreas decided that was it. And and so it was time to move on. Um, and so yeah, that was basically how I used to eat. And like I said, not that atypical for a
yeah.
person in the States.
Yeah, so you're pretty much doing what everyone else is doing. So you didn't feel that hey, I'm doing something different here. This is normal, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, you're staying active. You're doing your volleyball.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, yeah, and your career, where you're working long hours, or
Yeah, I mean, I run a technology company, and so uh at that time, I worked. I would say I worked the kind of hours I did when I was in my 20s. Worked a lot longer then as a early 40s executive running a company. I probably worked a lot less. Stress levels reasonably high, but not crazy high. Um, and in fact, actually, I was actually at that moment in a really good place in my company's evolution. So I actually wasn't like super stressed out at that time or anything. No, I don't. I really don't. I can't put a thing like I've tried. Believe me, I've thought about this a lot. Like, what was going on then? And I think at the end of the day, sometimes what's the line from the Big Lebowski? Sometimes you eat the bear, and sometimes the bear eats you. And I think just the bear came along to eat me, really, at the end of the day. But that gave and many people like I've not had a lot of other friends, and we've talked about prevention and stuff and how you kind of most people like my mother-in-law travel like a 5 or 8 year where their doctor's telling them, hey, it's getting a little high, you might want to think about cutting back before they get to a place where they actually have to take drugs or metformin or one of those kind of drugs, which is pretty low level, all the way on up to like insulin. And most people, that's a very long journey. In my case, like I said, I it happened to have happened very quickly to me.
and how about your sleep? I mean, you said it wasn't a lot of stress, but were you sleeping well?
No, my sleep sucked then. It sucks now. I mean,
Okay.
it's actually it's not. That's actually not true. Um, I in the last 7 or 8 years, one of the things that I did start doing, which has helped both in stress levels and just kind of general outlook, is I do transcendental meditation. So I do that. Well, if I'm good, I do it 4 or 5 days a week. If I'm bad, I'll do it 2 days a week. But that has helped a little bit on sleeping. But I think I slept. better then than I do now, which is not uncommon. I crossed the 50 barrier. When you start crossing that, sleep starts being a little harder to come by. But it wasn't like, from my case, it used to be I used to struggle to get to sleep. Once I was asleep, you couldn't
Yeah.
the couldn't wake me. But as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier to fall asleep and harder to stay asleep. Which, like I said, that's kind of also a normal health pattern that a lot of people have. Um, and it's funny. I don't know if you ever saw that movie Big Daddy. There's all there's the kids turning down the thermostat in the middle of the night, and the three dads are like, "Whoa, it's turning down the thermostat!" Right? But of course, they're all up at 3 in the morning because they're dudes over 50. So they're up at 3 in the morning going to the bathroom. That's just, it's kind of part of the, rites of passage for men. You get into your middle age, and that's kind of what happens. And but most of that, sleep was is and was a challenge. I don't know that that's gotten a whole lot better. It's gotten
Yep.
different, um, for sure, definitely different. But yeah, it's interesting. The TM really helped me more with, uh, I would say, so like a lot of entrepreneurial types, my head is very zzz, and the TM thing has helped me kind of make that more of a background buzz than
Okay.
a thing. And so I tend to do it when I feel that, kind of overwhelmed a little bit, and it'll, 15, 20 minutes of that, and I'm like, bam, I'm back. Uh, which, like I said, that happened to have happened, but I'd already gotten through the diabetes thing for a few years before I ran a buddy of mine turned me onto it. And
Okay. Okay.
um, but and I tackled this exact question, sleep and exercise, in my book,
Yep.
and because of it they do impact your sugar
Mm.
levels for sure. There's a lot of studies that indicate that. What's interesting is that it doesn't actually seem to matter what meditation you do, or mindfulness, or whatever. It's just that you do it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like,
Yeah.
what's the best exercise? An
Yeah.
exercise you'll do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. And I think, I really want to get back to the story now. Like, I think you've really shared a great baseline as to what you're doing pre-diagnosis, and then, okay, you've just been hit by the freight train, and whoa, what's going on here? You've been cleared, through the MRI about, it's not pancreatic cancer. And now, what was the next step? Yeah.
So the next step was, I fired my primary care physician. That was a big
Right.
deal.
Okay.
And not because she did a bad job. In the United States, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, primary care physicians are such a premium, and there's just not enough of them, and they're entirely too busy. And so they've heard clowns like me say, "Oh, I'm going to change it with lifestyle 100 times." And so they get really tired, and they're like, "Just shut up and have some metformin, and we'll go talk about insulin in a few years." But I got other patients. I got 40 other people waiting in the waiting room. I don't have time for this. And so I left that doctor, not because she was doing a bad job. She was telling me, as like I said, which is the straight, according to Hoyle, medical way that it's done in the US. I went and I found a concierge doc, which sounds like a fancy thing, but really is just a primary care physician you pay about $100 a month to. That's it. So a cable bill, basically. And so it was a little expensive, but it wasn't like break the bank expensive. And so, but the difference there was, when I talked to the lady who ended up being my concierge doc, um, and I explained that what I really wanted to do was to not be diabetic and to not take drugs. And she was like, "Okay, let's figure out how you do that." The difference between that and what I was originally told, which is, "Yeah, shut up, kid, you're bothering me," and okay, let's talk about it, let's figure that out, is huge. Because uh, what I write in my book is not to say that doctors suck and you shouldn't listen to them. That's not it at all. I listened to. I just went for my annual checkup about a month ago, and she and I were talking about, like, just different things going on health wise. I mean, we're having a real discussion about what works, what doesn't work, all these different things. So it's not that I did this without medical advice. I absolutely did with medical advice, and everything that you see in my book. I include endless citations for, because I don't want people to believe this because I'm just saying it. I want them to look themselves. You don't believe me? Look up the direct study in England. You don't believe what I have to say about all these other things, like we were just talking about sleep affecting your blood sugar. I quote the studies. There's like three or four of them in there, because it's important, if you're going to do something important with your health that really matters like this. It's important that you do it because you know it's right. That's why I feel. If I don't know it's right, then I'm just blindly like taking a drug or doing a thing, and I'm not really invested in it myself. But when I look it up myself, when I say, oh, okay, this is not just some crackpot who wrote a book writing this out. It's actually, there's a ton of studies on this subject that continue to this day, and started a couple of them started in the 70s. Now, like the direct studies from the mid 90s, and they're still following the same people and discovering that these same patterns consistently go through. So that was I think the big thing is I got a doctor who was willing to work with me. I got a nutritionist, but frankly, I ran through what the nutritionist had to say pretty fast.
Okay.
That wasn't as helpful. I'm sure it's helpful for some people. It wasn't particularly helpful for me. Um, and then I put together a set of rules that I outline in this book about how I was approaching food. And this is the part where I've kind of diverged a little bit from medical orthodoxy. So in the studies that I quote in my book, if it's okay if I get into this part,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all right. In the studies that get into my book, what you'll see is, for instance, in the direct study, if you lose 10% of your body weight by whatever means, the odds are very high that you will stop being diabetic. Type 1 is completely separate, by the way. Type
Mm.
1, that's an autoimmune disease, totally different thing. But type 2, if, if you lose 10% of your body weight, that's going to happen. You could do that with paleo. You could do that with 100 different ways. You could do that. That is because, and this was after that study was initiated, that we have since discovered that it's visceral fat in your pancreas that's actually the culprit here. Um, so basically, 10% of your body weight, about 80% of people will suddenly become not diabetic. A percentage of those people, even if they put the weight back, and it's because the fat won't end up in their pancreas, a certain percentage of those people, even if they go back to their previous weight, will stay non-diabetic. I looked at it and I said, okay, well, why is that? And so I started looking and I started looking. What you'll see, and this is where I diverge a little bit from the orthodoxy, is not the reality. What you'll see if you look up like the NIH or any of these sorts of health organizations is they'll say soluble fiber, and this is what they always say, may help with your blood sugar control. What they're not telling you, and this is the part that's really, really important, and as I term the chapter in the book, studies I bet my life on, because I did. Um, Soluble fiber is the controlling mechanism you can use to reverse diabetes without drugs. That's it. I mean, one sentence, that's basically, if you took nothing away from the rest of this podcast, that's it. The question, of course, for most people is, well, what the hell is soluble fiber?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I imagine that's the first question.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? As opposed to regular fiber, right? So there's lots of different types of fiber. Corn and or wheat or something like that. These kind of insoluble fibers. Basically, as we know, they're great for you. First of all, they're great for you, but they're good for your digestion. They're good for all sorts of things. They don't do squat for blood sugar control. They simply will not help you. You can eat all the whole wheat bread you want in the world, and that is not going to do a thing for your blood sugar level. But soluble fiber, which is oatmeal, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, chickpeas, hummus, edamame. I mean, and this is one of the things. There's another chapter in my book. They're on every restaurant menu you've ever been to. They're always there. Those foods, chia, uh, lentils, all of these things, the things that kind of gum up and they become a slurry, the medical term is for it, in your stomach as you digest them, because they're hard to digest, but you can digest them. And so what happens is it slows down your digestion, which, and this is where the weight loss comes in, you feel more full. right? And so because you feel more full, you don't eat as much. So anyway, the point is it slows down your digestion, which slows down the blood sugar absorption. And that is what is making the statement you see in the NIH and stuff like that helps control blood sugar. Well, the truth is, it does a whole lot more than that. In what I discovered is, as near as I can tell, and this is the thing I'd love to see somebody study and really get a real number on. I do it as a 1 gram of added sugar equals 1 gram of soluble fiber. So I'll throw down, like before I eat dinner tonight, we're going to go have sushi, right? It's my daughter's going off to college, and we're going to go eat some sushi. So I like sushi, but white rice is nothing but sugar.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to do, which I do anytime I go to a sushi restaurant, is I'm going to literally order an entire order of edamame for myself. And I'm going to throw all those little soybeans down the entire waiting for our sushi. I'm going to eat all the soybeans. And then, because my digestion will be much slower, when I have the white rice that's in with the sushi, it will be slowed down and my blood sugar won't spike. And because my blood sugar doesn't spike, my A1C never goes up. And that's where the real danger, why blood sugar spikes are bad for your body, is the spikiness. These are spikes, your body reacts as a stress. And that's where your pancreas normally goes bananas and throws a ton of insulin that you manufacture in your body to fight it. By using soluble fiber, you can slow down that process and not get the spikiness. And that's really it. That's basically it in a nutshell. Is
Yeah.
that's my whole process right there.
Yeah.
Um, and it works. It works like a
Wow.
charm. And it doesn't take a special diet. Soluble fiber, like I said, is on every restaurant menu. The only ones I haven't found it on is like McDonald's, right? But short of a McDonald's or an ice cream parlor, you're pretty much gonna find it everywhere. Once you know what you're looking for, it's very easy.
And McDonald's understands that it slows down your digestion, hence makes you full quicker, and it doesn't like that because you don't
No,
eat
they
as
want
many
you to eat more
burgers.
Big Macs.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I like I said, and the other thing, and I'm sure that you get this in your podcast, because this is not a diet, right? It's more looking for these foods, including them in every single meal. By doing that, I'm able to do things like say, I do want sushi, right? I don't have to deprive myself of that. Now, am I going to have 4 rolls? No. But honestly, after you throw down an entire bowl of edamame, you're probably not going to want 4 rolls of sushi, right? So it does tend to be self reinforcing a little bit. But I also really believe, and I imagine you probably heard this in your podcast before, in habit stacking and temptation bundling. And I just described temptation bundling almost perfectly, which is have all the edamame so that you can have the sushi you really want, right? That sort of thing. And habit stacking where you just make it part of your routine. It's not a diet, it's not a special thing you do. It's just in the background, you just do it all the time to the point where, like, I was thinking about this recently. I've gotten my insulin resistance down so low now that I'm basically like I was at 43, but I still eat this way because it's just easier and healthier.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even take any effort anymore. I don't even think about it.
And
It's
and
good.
if I think about, my experiences going into Japanese restaurants, typically they'll serve up the edamame as like a starter plus a miso soup, and I'm thinking, well, the edamame is doing exactly as you said. It's that soluble fiber. It's I guess nice on the stomach in terms of it's going to allow it to digest the meal, and you don't overeat. And then you've got the miso soup that's also a bit of a primer to the
Mhm.
digestive system. And I'm just thinking, like, traditionally, they had all this worked out, but we sort of really diverged away from
Frankly,
traditional.
I mean, if you ever been to Italy, if you watch the way the Italians eat, that's pretty much what they do too. And the Greeks and the Middle Eastern cultures, all of those cultures kind of do this. You just kind of start noticing it, and you're like, okay, that is probably, they didn't know why, but
Yeah,
they knew that these were important things to include in your diet, and they're just kind of part of the natural world. Um, but I would say the other thing, and this is really really important. I practice self forgiveness. It's critical. You can't do a change, a left turn, as I call it, so hard in your life, like I did, and not practice the art of self forgiveness because you're going to screw it up. I live in New Orleans. One of New Orleans's many nicknames is Sugar Town. And Domino Sugar is based here, right? The most famous things in our food culture here are largely sugar based, right? So it's a continual temptation, a continual thing that's in the background in my life because I live in a place that's very challenging for this kind of diet. But like I said, it at this point it's really so straightforward that I don't even really think about it anymore. But when I do, like if I do have some king cake during Mardi Gras, I'm gonna have a small slice, but I'm not gonna sit there and torture myself and like stare at the king cake like, don't have it, Chris, don't have it. I'm not gonna do that to myself. I'm gonna say, okay, let's go find the butter beans, and that's a very popular Mardi Gras era, like time during that time of year food. If I'm at somebody's house, they're gonna have some form of beans on the stove. I guarantee it. Either red beans or they're gonna have butter beans. I'm gonna go throw down the butter beans, and then I'm gonna have a sliced king cake, and I'm going to do it in that order very deliberately, and it will make me have a smaller slice of king cake, but I'm still not going to feel bad about it. And that's the whole thing. Because if you run around trying to deprive yourself all the time, no one can do that, not forever. And like I said, I've been doing this 2017 to 2025 now, so that's almost 8 years. Um, and I haven't really changed my body weight since 20 mid 2017 when I kind of went the other way. And so I look pretty much the same because I'm eating the same stuff. And it's remarkable how all of the other biomarkers, so like triglycerides, cholesterol, all those things, all also they were I was doing the pre-diabetes bit on those ones. It was like my doctors would say, well, Chris, your cholesterol is getting a little high, blah blah blah, right? None of those are high now. But again, like I said, if you're eating the kind of soluble fiber I'm talking about, man, you're throwing down broccoli at every meal. Yeah, you're going to be pretty regular, and your cholesterol is going to be low. um, and like I said, it tastes good. I mean, it's easy. Honestly, and I felt that once Tim had this happen to him, and I was thinking about like, what is it that's making it work that I could tell to a friend? It was like, it's got to be easy, and you got to forgive yourself your lapses. Have to. If you don't,
A-
you won't do it.
Absolutely, because that whole beating yourself up is just causing a stress response in your body and causing more blood sugar dysregulation. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah, yeah,
You're absolutely right. I mean,
yeah.
and so I try, like I said, the big thing for me is been, uh, and also, I'll be honest with you, my wife being on my side with this really helps. So, um, and I include some recipes in my book that are staples in our house, but they're no more complicated than like blueberries and oatmeal, sort of pre-made stuff. But they're there to make it easy. So if these are the foods that, like, if I open my refrigerator right now for tomorrow morning for breakfast, the the oatmeal casserole that we make, it's great because it keeps all week, so you can just kind of like make it on like Sunday and it'll last you all week. Um, it's just sitting right there. It's literally the easiest thing in my refrigerator to pick up and walk off with. And as a result, that's what I do because people are lazy. I'm lazy. Everybody's lazy. So you do the easiest thing in front of you. So if you can, that's part of habit stacking. If you make the easiest thing, the most habit forming thing you got, connected to things that are good for you, then you'll actually do them.
Hmm.
Um, there's some other things that I think are worth mentioning. I think you kind of touched on one of them. So I play volleyball. Volleyball, especially, I play at a reasonably high level. Doubles, fours, stuff like that. Some sand, some grass, no indoor. It's too hard on my knees nowadays. Uh, that exercise, well, good for me, is not nearly as good from a sugar regulation control as taking the dog for a walk after dinner.
Wow. Okay.
Because this is part of the studies. One of the studies that I read about and then followed up with a couple others showed that even 2 minutes of moderate exercise, walking down the street, walk the dog, after a meal lowers your blood sugar level by about 20%. Just that. Don't do anything. I literally like, well, I'm gonna walk the dog after dinner anyway. Why not do it right after I eat? So we go after we put the dishes in the sink and we walk the dogs down the street and go around the block. Takes like maybe 5 minutes, but that's one of those little habits that by making now, if we skip it and we got to go somewhere after dinner, and so we don't walk the dog, I don't beat myself up, as I was saying. But putting that habit in there, these little tiny things make a huge difference in your outcomes.
Incredible. Like you think about it, like because the modern lifestyle is to have a big meal and go lie on the couch, right? And to
Right.
watch, yeah, it's like,
Absolutely. And that's
yeah,
where it's like, I will lie on the couch. I absolutely. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch a couple of TV shows afterwards, but I'm going to walk the dog first. And I got to walk the dog anyway.
Hmm.
So if I get it out of the way right after dinner, I'm doing myself a favor in my blood sugar, but I'm also making myself feel better about sitting on the couch for the next hour and a half watching some show. So it's both, and that's where I think a lot of the non-food things that are in my book are a lot about making the things that help you be healthy part of your life so that you don't notice them, because if they are a big effort, you simply will stop doing them. And so if they become part of the background noise of how you live, then they just disappear into the background and you don't even realize you're doing them. And in fact, the one of the things I love about the way that I've figured out how to do this kind of soluble fiber approach. So I had lunch today. We're doing like a lunch series that we're going to do little Instagram and TikTok posts on going to a restaurant, and I'm just going to look at the menu. I'm going to talk about what I would eat at the restaurant. And the person I'm working with, who's helping me do those, she and I've probably eaten. She used to work with us. I'll bet you I've had 100 meals with her, maybe more. And we worked together for like 5, 6 years. She never noticed the way I eat. Never once. Until I told her I wanted her to help me with the media thing. And she was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Well, I wrote a book on sugar." And she's like, What? And that's one of the big things is that I don't have to be the special person at the table. Or I can just be the normal person ordering like anybody else, and no one would ever know that I'm eating a different way than they are. Like I said, I order the whole thing of edamame. I don't think anybody's ever asked me, "You're going to literally eat the whole edamame thing by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Yeah. You want your own? You're going to have to get your own bowl of edamame," right? And nobody cares. I mean, nobody even notices or cares, but it makes a gigantic difference for me in terms of blood sugar control without being notable to others, which I like because I like I said, I struggle with diets where I have to ask for something special. I don't want to be that person. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with being that person. I just couldn't do it myself. And so this way I don't have to.
Yeah, so you've worked out a way to navigate the modern world without drastic change. It's sort of work, you can work with it and without really standing out, without really dieting, but still manage and well, it's not it's yeah, managing your blood sugars essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's preventing blood sugar spikes
yeah,
by picking the
yeah.
right foods and eating them at the right times. And that's really it in a nutshell. The
And
rest of it is all details.
when you say right times, what's the right times?
So if you think about it, and
Yeah,
there's been a lot, right? The last 6 months or so, I've noticed there's a lot of media around this, and a couple of good studies. But you can see it in the background of other studies, which is there is an important difference in the. So if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Your intestines are a pipeline. It starts with the thing you ate last, and it goes to the thing you ate first this morning, right? And then it goes out the other end. We're basically an amoeba. We're a paramecium, all grown up, right? But you're still a tube that takes in food in one way and gets it out the other way at the end of the day. Um, and so that's why the edamame has to come first, and that's why I'll either take the sides, like if somebody has broccoli as a side, I'll treat it as an appetizer because you want that soluble fiber in front of anything that you're going to have that has sugar load in it. And like I said, in the last 6 months, there's a bunch of people talking about this kind of progressive eating thing, which I had never heard of it before I started doing it, but it's just kind of, and I didn't realize it was a thing, but it is, but it makes sense if you think about it. Your body has to digest and pull nutrients and energy out of your food as it goes along. And so if you are slowing it down ahead of time with all the soluble fiber, then your sugary foods, your white carbs like bread or rice or stuff like that, or potatoes or whatever, that are coming behind, have to go through that first. And so the fact that your digestion is slower, it's also what makes the chemical signals in your gut biome go, hey, by the way, you're full, right? Because it's slower. And because it's slower, that's what makes you feel fuller with soluble fiber. And so that progressiveness of it, starting with the soluble fiber first, and then going with the other foods, is one of the things that makes this work. And kind of randomly ran across that. I didn't actually know that that's what I was doing. It just made sense to me to do it that way. But like I said, in the literature, like my favorite, the direct study out of England, they don't mention that. They just say up your soluble fiber by X% in your meals, and you're going to be fine. I amend that to say up your soluble fiber at the beginning of the meal, and it's going to be a lot better. I don't know. Like I said, there's some studies recently about that, and I've read them. It's not 100% clear how strong that effect is, but to me, it just makes sense.
And so, how many grams a day of soluble fiber would you be consuming roughly?
That's a great question. So let's think about this. If I get a bowl, let's just say, I don't know what the nutrition content of our oatmeal casserole is, but I do know what oatmeal is. So let's start with oatmeal. So if I had a bowl of oatmeal and some yogurt in the morning and some blueberries, which is my typical breakfast. And then I had, like today, I went to this Mediterranean place and I had hummus and baba ganoush and some other stuff. So that's probably 7 or 8 in the morning, and another at least 5 or 6 at lunch. And then tonight, like I said, we're gonna go sushi, so that's probably another 6-ish, probably 20,
Mhm.
16 to 20 grams, somewhere in there.
So it's not out
Um,
of this world. Like it's
no, that's
not.
not like a
No,
crazy
no,
carb load. No,
no,
I mean
no,
that's
no.
not like go freaking bananas, have 70
Yeah,
carb. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean that's, I'm just guessing, but that's probably, I'm reasonably educated on the subject. That's probably about 20 grams, if I
yeah.
had to
Okay,
guess.
okay.
And like I said, that's not so much that people are like, dude, what's going on with you?
Yeah, it's very durable. Like it's yeah, it's not
Well,
out
part
near.
of it is also
Yeah,
looking at the labels, right?
yeah.
So, and I had this in my book. It's one of my favorite things. I used, when I first got kind of religion on soluble fiber, I used to have these fig bars that we had in the office. And so I since I had control over what we spent money on in our kitchen snacks, I switched us all from my unhealthy snacks of cookies and crap and chips and junk to our healthier snacks. Well, one of them was these fig bars. And I then later looked, and the darn fig bars have as much added sugar as Oreos.
Wow,
9
wow,
grams in a single
wow,
serving. And I
wow.
was like, wow, oh my goodness. And that's one of the things is I got educated on foods to know, like, because that's, how do you know what is soluble fiber on a menu? That's the part we got to do a little bit of detective work, and it doesn't take a lot to learn. It's usually pretty obvious. Um, but in foods, when you go to the grocery store, there's that line. The only, for sugar control, there's like 3 lines that you got to look at. It's the added sugar line, total fiber line, and the soluble fiber line. That's it. The rest of the label you could just ignore. Yeah, and from a sugar control perspective, you got other issues, you might have to look at the rest of it. But if you're trying to control sugar, really those 3 lines. And all I do is, a good food is a food where the soluble fiber number and the added sugar number are either equal or the soluble fiber number is higher. That's it. Very
Wow.
simple. And that means that I'm treating a gram of sugar as a gram of fiber.
Yeah,
I don't know that that's true, but I'm a human being that goes to the grocery store. I don't need a formula. I need something simple,
yeah,
because if I can't follow it, I won't do it. And so if I look at, like, so I give the example of cereal. Most health food cereals are terrible. They're terrible for you from a sugar perspective. They may be great for you if you're gut health or whatever you're trying to do. But if you're trying to control sugar, there's very few quote unquote healthy cereals that are not terrible for you. I
yeah.
mean, the added sugar number in those things is crazy. Um, there's only two that you can actually have and that I found in the cereal aisle consistently. One is regular old Cheerios. Cheerios has slightly more soluble fiber than added sugar. That's it. Any other form of Cheerios like Honey Nut or any of that junk, forget it. Right. And either Wheaties or Total, which are just about even. Um, but once you know that, like you can go in and be like, okay, do I like Wheaties? Or I like, you can make those choices, but there's only these very few lines to look at because you can't spend the day going through the labels trying to figure out, oh man, which one of these. I mean, it's got to be easy, and that's why I just
Uh,
did the 1 gram for 1 gram because I gotta keep things simple. If I don't keep them simple, I won't do them.
That's fantastic, and I really like your simplicity and making it easy to do, and with the modern lifestyle. So yeah, I think it's great, and because it's really helpful for others because everyone's living this modern life,
Yeah,
and we and we need to
I don't have time.
we
I don't have time
yeah
for that.
yeah yeah yeah.
Like I said, and also if I had to spend a lot of time, but it does. Like so, like for example, we went on vacation recently, and we had an Airbnb, so we had a kitchen, and so I was like, oh, we'll get some, we eat out and stuff when we're traveling, but breakfast, let's have it at the house. And so, but we're in a different place. We went to Ireland, and so the brands are completely different, right? I mean, there's some brands that you recognize, but a lot of the brands are different, but the labeling is pretty much the same. And so, following this pattern, I was very easily able to pick breakfast foods that would work for me without too much trouble, even in a foreign country. Admittedly, it's an English speaking foreign country, but still somewhere where the brands weren't familiar to me. And that, if that took a lot of time and a lot of thinking, I probably just would have grabbed the first
Mm.
thing off the shelf. And because I kept it simple and I could just go like, okay, who's got more soluble fiber than sugar? Whichever one of these it is, that's the one I'm getting. Or they're at least equal. Um, and the other thing, and a lot of people have written about this, people who do other types of diets, who go vegan or go paleo or whatever, right? When you get sugar out of your diet, like really get it out of your diet, it's weird how little you like things that have sugar in them.
Mm.
It's a weird thing. That I was not expecting at all. Like if I have the coffee place we go to in the mornings, if they accidentally put sugar in my iced coffee, I notice immediately, and I'm like, yeah, I just can't drink that.
Wow, wow,
It's
wow.
weird. Like I would
Yeah.
never in a million years have thought that would be the way it is, but I don't even want like my daughter likes sweet stuff like a lot of teenagers, and she'll tempt me with an Oreo from time to time, and I'll have one, and I'm like, yeah, I'd have one, maybe two, but I'm not going to sit down and throw down a sleeve of Oreos like I would when I was 30.
Well,
It's
so this book you've written also helps with beating sugar. So let's
It does. It's kind
yeah.
of a weird thing, man. I mean, like I said, changing your life like that. It also, I will say, and this is why I actually do believe very strongly in people continuing to test. Like I still, not every day by any means, but quarterly, I give myself an at-home A1C test, and I do that for two reasons. One, just to kind of make sure everything's still on track. But two, it gives you a sense of accomplishment. And that sense of accomplishment is part of what helps you continue
Mm.
doing what you're doing,
Yeah,
is because you know it's working. And when you
yeah,
know it's working, like, oh, okay, I not only feel better, it actually is working. And
yeah.
that knowledge, I feel, reinforces the behavior that allows me to continue doing the life the way I do it without really effort, is because I know it's working. And if I didn't, I'd be wondering like, oh, because I understand a lot of people are like, well, I'll wait till I go to the doctor to find out. I'm not one of those people,
Mm.
but I'm also a technology guy, so I'm a systems person, and so I need systems that I can follow, and knowing what those numbers are is one of those things that I feel is important.
So not only your approach is simple, it works. So I'm sure
Yeah.
the listeners are really keen to find out where they can locate this book.
Sure. The book is called Beating Diabetes, and you can go to beatingdiabetes.us is the website, and that's also the Instagram handle and the TikTok handle.
Fantastic. To the listeners, I'll include those links in the show notes so you can go directly to the show notes. You can connect with Chris as well as find his book via the show notes. And Chris, I just really want to thank you for coming on and sharing such great insight on beating diabetes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I look forward to having another one someday.
Absolutely. I'm keen to have a part two with you to really keep this momentum that you've created around beating diabetes because it's such a common disease out there that people are struggling with. And you've got an approach that's simple and effective.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.